Hey, Nat, it's so good to see you again. Thanks you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Why don't you give us a little bit of your background and maybe we can tell the audience how we know each other.
I am a brand marketer. I kind of accidentally started in plant-based foods. This is where I've kind of been for the last decade. So I met Brian at Vega. We both worked there. I was there 5 years. So heavy background in plant-based foods, CPG specifically. Just recently decided to do a full switch into footwear, which is kind of random, but it's super exciting.
How about we start with what separates a good brand from like the great brands?
One of the biggest takeaways for me is working in the industry is the authenticity of a brand. It's so important. Consumers are not only smarter now, but they're asking a lot of questions, and digital media, it's even harder to try to hide anything and it's not worth your time. So really ensuring that you understand what your brand values are and ensuring that it becomes kind of your constant North Star of everything that you do, whether it's from your manufacturing to your packaging to what you say to your consumers, really will help you set you apart from the competition, but also keep you true to who you are. So an example is if sustainability is something that's key part of your business and your mission, ensuring it's integrated in everything you do. So for example, like manufacturing is a big one. And if you learn that your manufacturer doesn't meet your, objectives that you want to hit, making a conscious decision not to continue with them is tough, but will help better align your branding for sure. Great brands are really great storytellers. And that is something that is tough to learn how to do. But if you understand something what we call is a USP, which is your unique selling proposition, it really will help you carve out your space in the market and against your competition. So going back to my sustainability example, if there's something you're doing that your competition isn't, you really want to speak loudly about it, and it will help break you apart from the noise the consumers are constantly being thrown at. Think about all the different ways a consumer is being marketed every single day, from your phones, when you're scrolling, when you're driving, the billboards that you see, right down to the grocery store. As soon as you walk in, there are signs flying at you everywhere. So you have to somehow be apart from all of that noise. And so if you have something unique and different to tell, that will stand out for that consumer. The best and most important takeaway that you'll take from this conversation is really understanding your consumer. You just can't be everything to everyone. Understanding your consumer, who they are, what they care about, what their pain points are. I think that's the biggest one, is how does your product or service solve for their pain points is going to be key to becoming a great brand. An exercise that I do regularly, a part of my job, is creating a muse or a consumer target. So I'll give you an example because I think that will help. So imagine you have someone named Tom. He's between 35 and 44. He likes to work out a couple days a week. He loves to hike, but he's very nutritious conscious, but he still loves to have his, not so good food on the weekends. So consumer insight for Tom might be he's vegan and he's looking for protein powder that is efficacious and made from whole ingredients. So that insight aligns to who he is as a person. And now that I know that, all my marketing activities would center around this type of consumer in language that resonates with him, and maybe on platforms where he might be visiting. So he might be an Instagram scroller, so maybe I want to talk to him there. So understanding what he does, who he is as a person, and how my product aligns to him allows me to talk to one person, if you will, or muse, which just better aligns all of your activities versus try and talk to a child, try and talk to an adult that's a female or male or senior, right? You're just trying to carve out and understand who you're talking to so that it's consistent. And then you also know where to market and how to market to them. So I think the consumer piece is the biggest one for me.
If I were starting my own supplement brand, I probably have a general idea of what my avatar or the muse is going to be. Is it more of that initial guesswork and then fine tuning, or is there like another way of doing it?
It starts off with an assumption, right? You're going to say, I'm creating something for some type of person. And what you'll see is through these platforms. So for example, you create an Instagram account, you will naturally see the type of comments, the type of folks that end up landing there, and you'll start to see who they are. If you all of a sudden start reaching a lot of North Americans, specifically in Canada, for example, it might be due to weather, it might be due to geographic location or seasonality. You'll start to see those things come through, but at the beginning, you're going to have to make some assumptions because you don't know yet.
And just to your point on authenticity and storytelling, I feel like the buyers now, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're not necessarily buying a product anymore. I feel like they're buying a brand. Like they're like, what do you guys stand for? Like in addition to like, how does the product help me? I think it kind of plays on both. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, especially right now, what's top of mind is that we're in a recession or a recession is coming. And so knowing that how a consumer spends their dollars has never been more important because they're making a conscious choice to buy you. And so how you speak to them and what you have to offer has to be different than what your competition is doing, or new, right? It has to pique interest. And I think knowing that you have to be more authentic as soon as you change that or cause any cause for concern or question marks, they're going to move on very quickly because there's so many options in different formats, for example. So yeah, it becomes, even now more than ever, standing true to being able to stand out apart through storytelling and ensuring it's authentic.
What can a small brand do to separate themselves or compete?
Yeah, I think my biggest question would be is, how are you different? What makes you different than your competition? Do you have something new that you're offering? Did you find some new ingredient that hasn't been in market? Finding your POD or point of difference really will set you apart, especially at the beginning. The scariest place to be is another Me Too brand. And a lot of, you'll see that in private label, for example, or just brands that literally are made to copy another brand at an extremely cheaper price point. But then you're sacrificing ingredients and other things. Knowing what your POD is and sticking to it will help keep your brand afloat and really allow your consumer to resonate with the point of difference that you have to offer. If you're a plant-based protein brand, for example, being plant-based isn't enough anymore, right? At the beginning, maybe 10, 15 years ago it was. There are so many brands to choose from in the category and in different formats. I mean, you can get drinkables, you can get protein powders, there's even pills. If you're a brand, for example, that uses maybe only organic ingredients that are only sourced in North America, because that's kind of unique, then it's something that could set you apart in the category, something you can talk about that's different and authentic because you can back it up with, your manufacturer. One thing I will say is you'll want to be sure another brand's not already doing it. So if you have a point of difference and someone else is doing it, you're going head to head with them. It's a strategy, but it's a tough one, especially at the beginning. One pro tip I have is once you determine your point of difference is you have to stick to it. And so it goes back to that storytelling piece, because at the beginning, when you're a small business, it's going to start to feel redundant. You're saying the same thing over and over again, every trade show, every consumer you talk to, and there's going to be a lot of in person. But the challenge is that's not everybody. That's not all the consumers, right? You want to carve out, a bigger consumer base. And so being able to continuously tell that story is going to be important. I worked for a plant-based company and their competitor was Silk, and they have the monopoly in the market. Everybody knows them. They have such great brand blocking. You walk in and you see them. And the brand I worked for had low brand awareness until they decided to do something which was quite expensive, but they started to test their product because they knew they had a better performing product when it came to taste. And so they went into consumer research and was able to achieve the claim best tasting almond milk. And so now what they're able to do is to go head to head with this Silk brand, which is what consumers know. But if you saw a company that maybe you know or heard of them and they have a claim that says best tasting and it's backed by research, you might actually pick them up now. And so I think it's like finding your difference, even though you might offer a very similar product.
One thing that I recommend to clients typically is to start brainstorming their POD before they even formulate or even talk to a manufacturer, just to get a sense of what the market is like.
Point of difference is a big one, but packaging, especially in the food supplement space, it is 100% your brand reflection in market when you're not there, because you can't be at the shelf with consumer when they're shopping, and it tells all the magic. It tells the consumer what the product is, what brand it's coming from, but more importantly, visually how it differs from something else. You need to stand out on shelf somehow. So how you design it, what you say on it, you've got, I think they say 10 to 30 seconds at shelf, you need to capture their attention. So a claim like that, for example, might give them a nod to continue to want to pick up the package and learn more.
When you say package, are you talking about the claims, or are you talking about the tub itself?
Yeah, it's the tub choice. I mean, usually brands at the beginning will use the most cost-effective one. So it'll be something that most brands are already using. Any way to stand off on shelf. So it might be your color choice. I recently launched, this is in the former company, a bright pink oat milk. And I remember people asking, why did you choose bright pink, like fuchsia hot pink? And it was because a consumer would not expect in the sea of gray and white and blue packaging, a hot pink package. And it worked. It was great. So risk-taking. That's what marketing is. It's like taking a chance on something. If it doesn't work, you can always change it. But we took a shot and it's pretty good.
So how does a brand determine their marketing opportunities?
Yeah, I would say today is a lot different than when I first started marketing, which was only a decade ago. We live in a digital space. And so we have a bit of a playbook every brand can lean into. Brands have really easy access to platforms and data when it comes to the Google, Meta, and Pinterest side of the world that allow you to share your brand, your story quite easily, and also at a low cost, if not free. Start within Meta, for example, depending on who your consumer is and where they're consume content. So if we go back to Tom, he would likely is, that mid 35 to 45 range. He's likely on Instagram and TikTok, even on Facebook. Those are great places to start building relevant content for your brand. So let's go back to a protein powder example to show, for example, usage. You might not be able to show that on your packaging, but you can definitely show it through content creation on these platforms, through different types of smoothies, for example. So there's different ways to leverage social media in ways that consumers are looking to consume content is, well, how am I going to use your product? When should I use it? The more you offer them content allows them to like you as a brand, start thinking about you as the option. When they do actually get to shelf, they might think, oh, I've seen you before, I've heard of you before. So I think leveraging what's at your fingertips, which is digital, and leaning into some of the platforms that are already available is a great place to start. Also, understanding where your consumer is a big one.
Are you speaking more of like just use the platforms as they are, or are you talking about pushing ads?
That's a good question. It's both. I would say creating a platform and starting to learn how to use the platform, especially if it's new to you, takes a minute. You also have to commit to it. There's a time commitment. It's not easy to learn right away. Right now, the Meta, so Facebook, Instagram, I wouldn't say they're expensive, but we've learned that TikTok right now seems to be a little bit more inexpensive because it's still fairly new. Now they're starting to set prices, but you can easily set your budget at $100 or $500 a month and then test. And I think that where there's dedication and time that you need to put in is understanding what does success look like when you spend X dollars. And there's a lot of YouTube channels that you can actually go on and learn about where to start and how to start, as well as on Instagram. There's so many accounts dedicated to support like exactly this, but just knowing which platform you should be on and then just looking out for key things. You can start with very small budgets.
To you, what does a great brand look like?
Yeah, so it's a loaded question. If you can build a brand that consumers remember, notice, and think about when your type of category comes up, you've done a good job. You've built something that is top of mind. You don't have to spend $250 on AirPods, and yet people do. You could easily buy $30 Amazon, whatever generic one. But the reason people love the brand so much is because they not only build a brand that you can trust, but it's up-to-date technology, and it's also a cool fact. There's a brand love that is attached to the aesthetic. I mean, it's white. I think now it seems very common and normal, but when they first came out with their shuffles or whatever it was, that wasn't really normal. They used a color and they were able to create an entire brand affinity for it. And I think knowing and understanding that there's a lot of trust in a brand is invaluable. And so when you're thinking about how to build a brand, it goes back to the first couple things I said. They're very good storytellers. They're able to visually articulate effectively in very cool and different ways. I don't know if you remember the original shuffle ads. It was like a silhouette of someone holding the headphones in the shuffle. And it was different than what was out in market, and they were able to carve that out. But are they any different than other headphones? I mean, it's arguable, right? Like there's many, many brands now, but if you're a brand fan where cost doesn't matter anymore, that to me is a great brand.
And for a smaller brand that's starting out, obviously they don't have the money to be an Apple at this point. Does it just come back to the storytelling, the authenticity, the unique value proposition, or is there something else that you would recommend that they do?
I definitely think the storytelling is going to be how you're able to gain your following and brand fans, if you will, because the more you're able to articulate why you're different and why you're authentic, authenticity will be done through that storytelling. That's how you would show up, and ensuring that your product delivers on what you're saying. Consumers will gravitate to your brand because you're meeting their needs. And that's why understanding who your consumer is, really, the more you understand them, you are offering them what they're missing, what they're looking for. If you're talking to a consumer that does not consume protein powder, for example, they're never going to pay attention to you. They're not going to follow you on Instagram. What you're putting out content-wise is not valuable to them. And so they go hand in hand. It's like understanding your consumer and then telling them a story that has meaning to them and solves something for them is going to help you build up that brand.